How long have you been involved
Uh,
with the series or show?
Embarrassingly, I've been involved for 51 years.
Oh, wow. That's
Yeah,
incredible.
yeah. The first television studio I stepped onto was 8H.
Incredible.
Lucky me.
Yeah, yeah.
No,
I think
I love the work. I think that the work is important and it's unusual, and that's why you stick around. You know.
I think we all showed up in 10-year intervals. I've been there 41, and I think Joe's been there 31. Is that right, Joe?
Yeah, I think if 32, but I think yeah,
Yeah,
I think it was 10
yeah.
years apart. Maybe it is
Something.
30.
Yeah. Yeah.
So altogether, it's like what is represented here is 100 years of designing.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
It's incredible.
A hundred
And
years of
the great thing
television designing.
and the great thing is you came in fresh, nothing, nothing to base it off of, had to kind of set the course and help create the path it's going to take. And then I'm sure you both came in as fans, um, 10 years later and 10 years later and got to, not only see Leo's work, but add to it and expand on it. But also, like I said, being a fan, I got to go into to the studio once, and it was quiet, and it was just one of my favorite things ever. It was just I had the opportunity to go walk up on the stage, and I don't know if I was supposed to see Lauren's office and all these crazy things that you could do back in the like 90s. Um, but there's something iconic about it, and it's like, I mean, not only is there something iconic, it's literally iconic, and people throw that term around a lot lately. But I'm like, SNL for 50 years. TV's only been around for what, 70 or so, and for 50 of those years, SNL has been delivering, making commentary. So when you and I've heard the stories about the script and what goes into the process, and I think it's Tuesday nights that they really start getting things rolling, and then
Wednesday
it's
night.
or Wednesday.
Wednesday.
Um, so
Don't give us that
how
much. You're giving us too much time.
well that's what I'm wondering. So what
Yeah.
when do you get involved? What when I mean the things that I see, I know that, and we'll ask some more questions about this, but there's a lot of things that you see on the screen and like you don't think about. But then you realize, wait, they just got the script. You have to come up
We
with this
don't get
custom
we don't get
solution.
scripts. We don't get scripts until Wednesday evening.
Okay. And
And
then it's
there's a read through around 4. It goes on to about 6 or 8. Then we get the cuts, and it's I forget how many sketches, Keith, like 30. We read 30,
Varies.
At least they're 30, 35. Yeah.
and
Yeah, almost. Yeah.
then it's I mean, I think that then it's edited to about 12. It's
Right.
10 or
Including
12,
yeah, including film pieces. Yeah.
and then we kind of divide up the work and work all. We try to get as much done as we can on Wednesday night, but Wednesday can go on for a long time. It depends on the show and the needs of the show. So, um, I wanted to mention something. We're also forgetting Eugene Lee, who had an enormous of influence on how the show is seen and how the show is shot. And he was, I met Gene, and he introduced me to 8H. I mean, and I was very lucky. But I think that we have to remember that when you say iconic, I think that he is the one that established what that word means in television, and he actually, from my point of view, it was all of this television stuff was new to me, but I understood that it was shot in everything was shot in as a proscenium kind of look way. And what happened when, Gene forced the studio that didn't satisfy that. And in a way, I feel that that's why the show is successful because it's established its look. And we can only get that look because the studio is designed that way.
And
And
when Eugene designed the original studio, he had no experience in television either. So having come from theater, he viewed it the way he would theater, which is essentially what we still do. We do theater with cameras.
and I think that, what's interesting is that what was interesting for me when I first came was it was the arguments and the discussions and about how the studio was going to be and how it ended up being what Gene wanted it to be. So, from the director down to Dave Wilson, down to the prop man, they saw our show as not being successful. And I do remember that several stagehands coming to me and saying, "Don't get comfortable here. You'll be gone in 6 weeks." And now, at 51 years later,
That's a great story.
you know,
It seemed like every couple of years, as a fan, you'd see the news story, the end of SNL, and there's always the, predicting it's over. And I'm like, never thought it was going anywhere. I'm like, how could they? Well, you know what? Things have changed in the world. So there's some crazy things when like like a Colbert is not making money. So, to be out there, put as big of bold statements out in the world and put the comedy out there. I was just watching some clips over. Um, and they push the envelope, and they have been since Jane was called an ignorant slut until they were playing with a bunt cake that didn't look like a bunt cake. And it's just amazing that through different cast changes, through different political and social changes, it keeps on. It doesn't reinvent itself, but finds a way to retain what it is, and still feel like if you look at an episode today, it still feels like the same show. Of course, camera quality is different and stuff like that, different people, different styles, but it still retains that SNL's feel. Um, is there, I mean, tons of questions about the logistics. I'm not going to get into all of that, but, I'm curious where all the sets go and things like that. But in the turnaround time is impressive, but I'm more curious about when you get those scripts, are there ever times that you say, we can't do this, or like what decisions are made early on in the process?
we always do it.
I
I
think
mean,
sometimes we don't say it, we think it, right? But
yeah,
I mean, it's actually something that we're pretty proud of. Is you don't really say no. I mean, we just say we'll do the best we can. We always are. Believe it or not, after 51 years, of course, I can only speak to my 30, but we do the best we could with the idea. And sometimes, yeah, it's an overwhelming task, and we think, how are we going to do this? But with all the experience, we tend to give it our best shot. And I think some of the generosity of theater, the fact that the theater is a little more forgiving than high-end film production and comedy, we're allowed to be a little campy sometimes and cut a few corners to get it done and to get the idea or gesture said without having to. And people don't always look at it and say, that's not real. We tell the story as best we could, just like you would in the theater, going back to what Keith said.
That Olivia Rodrigo sketch, the staircase sketch, was a really great example of that, Chuck.
I was going to bring that up.
The way that was done. It was incredibly clever. How to do something live that's not written, it's not particularly written to be done live, and
Yeah.
we just figured it out. And,
The Edge of Destiny is what it was called. I was going to bring that up because I thought it was so clever. Because at first I was like, how do they do this? And then I realized, it was a camera angles and all that. But so
it kind
my
of went
question,
viral, but weren't those shots, like the wide shots of how it was being done, sort of went viral, I think, after the show,
I
didn't
didn't
it?
see
Like
that.
everyone could sort of see how the effect was created.
Since
Yes.
COVID, I stay away from viral.
Ah,
When you did that, was the production design, the way your solution was part of what made the humor. Was that always intended? Did they know was it just like, hey, we're gonna have people
You
get
know,
thrown down the
you know
stairs?
where the idea actually came from was Steve Higgins,
Yeah.
who's the head writer.
That's
And
right. Yep.
he kind of it was a cinematic thing that he was explaining and explained it to us about it. We had to divide, the railing and the back wall, so they were two pieces. And he kept explaining that that's really how they did it in old cinema. So it's how Joe designed it and worked on it. So and it was complicated, but because it was a visual that we had not not attempted at all before. So
And it was it was two separate sets
yeah, and
as
we were
well.
lucky. Yeah, yeah, but they were lined up together. Like
Yeah.
the railing was in front of the wall, and those two
And
things had to move separately.
Yeah, initially we actually provided the whole balcony upper level and the whole room, and then there was discussion really after it was built. We don't need the whole first floor. Let's just drop it down. So we actually lowered the set. So it was just a few steps to run down. They tightened the shot, and we provided 50 feet, 50
It was
feet of railing.
50 feet. It was the longest that we've ever designed in the
Yeah,
history.
it was,
It
you
just
know,
and
ran the whole length.
and the camera didn't move. The wall and the railing moved,
Yes.
and the people were just jumping up and down in place.
And
That's what I thought was so funny is I'm like, well, they could have done this skit, and maybe the skit was written where they're thinking we'll throw a dummy down the stairs or something. And
now,
instead, the way that your solution made it much more, entertaining and watching these actors kind of flipping around and, I forget who it was who
but I
had
think
the
that, I mean, I think that that's how Higgins envisioned it. And,
okay.
I mean, and if I'm not wrong on Wednesday, it's how the writer envisioned something that we really try to get at. I mean, we have a meeting separate from Lauren, and they meet in our design office, and we kind of with the director, and we kind of dissect their writing, and that's very helpful, even though we get very little time to do it. Every writer, I think, or every sketch writer is given like 10 minutes to make their pitch. So, but we've been very lucky. I mean, that the whole the thing with the staircase worked. I mean, it was. I don't know how you felt. I felt anxious when we first tried it. So,
but we try to honor the vision of the writers because that's really they steer their piece and produce them, which is very unique compared to most television. They
and
really
I think and yes, and I think that that's what's unusual about our show is that we get to collaborate with the writers. I mean, I've been in productions where you don't even see the writers. The writers don't show up. You're given a script, given a description of what the visual is, and then you go off and do it. But I think that the involvement makes it a lot more. I don't know. It makes it.
Well, I think it's an
Is
unusual show where our writers actually produce their pieces. They're the ones we're interacting with. Well, we interact with the director and and everyone else, but we actually, the writers, it's their responsibility to sell their piece. So we're
So
dealing with them all along.
So what has been your biggest, it could be the success based on the writer's response, you brought this to life and they were amazed by it, or just the biggest challenge. What are some of your Mount Rushmore of best production design solutions that in it could be, or ones that you just, that the public loved, just things that stand out to you.
I'm Stephen, I don't want to, I'm just saying, you're not the first person to ask that question, and I never have a really good answer for that one. because there's been thousands between the
Well,
three of us. There's been thousands of sketches at this point.
here's what I think. I mean, it's like instead of like focusing on the Jack Black, Jack White show, they should look at the whole season, because the whole season is a show filled with surprises and new ways to do visuals and stuff. And we always, and as Joe was saying and Keith is saying, we never say no. I mean, maybe that's our mistake, but I mean, we've always been told we try to find a solution best we can to any writer's visual idea. So I don't,
I think that's incredible.
It's a hard question to answer.
No, that's all right. Yeah, I mean, I'm just curious because I even just going through, and skimming through some of the episodes, I had already watched them, but you don't always sit there and watch thinking with this in mind. Your brain is watching, paying attention to the comedy and the acting.
You know what? Let me reverse the question and ask you, which sets did you find outstanding?
Part of me, I always wonder, so those are your restaurant scenes, which seem like maybe you kind of keep some of it and in storage and bring it out, and then you have talk shows and things like that. I'm like, I always wonder how much of this is just reworked and how much of this is made from scratch each week. I don't really have standouts because when you're supposed to be in the White House press room, that's where I am visually. I'm not thinking about that. Like I said, I'm focused more on the performance.
I would say that's a good thing. If you're focused on the comedy, we as designers have been very successful then. I think that's what we're there for. And yes, to tell you the truth, talk shows and restaurants and other offices kind of get redone. But, there are, as you mentioned, there are one or two or three sketches that you will remember as the staircase sketch. You'll remember that as a piece of brilliant comedy.
So as long as we're the writer's piece, we do use sometimes our footprint or our envelope for a talk show or a game show or a regular restaurant. We do use them, but then that's when Keith's work comes into play. That's important, but because the decoration and dressing is never the same unless it's intended to be the exact same location. So but when you're working in this confined environment of the studio, some of those sets are 12, 14 feet wide. That's it. And if the floor plan works, we like to stick with it, but we try to pepper it with, more unique or interesting kind of textures. And that's the finishing touches,
I like what Leo said about the Emmy submission thing. We're the Emmys expect you, let's say you've done 20 shows or 22 shows or something, and you can put up one. But I always think people, maybe it's egotistical to think that people know the show, but I think people know what the show is. And it's not that we choose a show each year arbitrarily, but we all have a little conversation. We all have a conversation and say like, well, which one, what do you think this year and something. So it just is usually maybe 3 or 4 that we're thinking about and so on. But it's not like any one show represents everything we do. But we're only allowed to put in that amount. So we like to think that people know what the whole season was, at least to some extent, So it isn't just about the Jack Black show, it's really.
Well, I think.
And we were just talking about the Sabrina Carpenter show, and obviously that's a separate show.
And I think when with Emmys as a whole, they say, hey, check out this Emmy nominated episode, or this person was in. And I'm like, well, that character exists before and after that, and that isolated piece. Same with this. The work. I don't think episode by episode. I just like I said, it's a mainstay for me. So, every Saturday, every weekend, I'm watching this, and it's the same. It's the consistency of quality. It's the going in there and being able to watch this and not wondering what you're going to watch, but just like you said, kind of get lost in it. Your work, it's kind of like some Broadway magic. Whenever I go to Broadway, I'm always amazed, like how they bring that little stage to life. And you're doing that numerous times, numerous times a year, numerous times a week, switching and changing and bringing to life something that shouldn't exist. And nowadays, most people probably would just use backdrops or AI or whatever garbage, but you guys are going out there and delivering something, continuing the history, the legacy of SNL. So I applaud that. I think it's amazing what you pull off, not just once, but every week, 20 sometimes a year or so, right?
Yeah.
Is there anything that any one thing that I'm curious, and I don't have to put this in there, but is there one time that you're like, oh man, couldn't accomplish this, or like right afterwards?
You
'Cause, like,
keep
you have to
you
put a
keep
lot.
you keep asking us that. I think if you look at our season, we are exactly what you have said prior. I mean, we were very I kind of amazed that we are able to do the work we do, and then there are you're looking at three designers who are very, very good at what they do. And obviously, you can find where we've not done well either.
That's awesome.
Well, I think it's a good place to end it, because that's kind of what my point was, is like, well, if you did, no one's pointed it out. It's not like anyone's like, online, and they like to tear everything apart these days. So your success is kind of being invisible, putting that stuff out there, making this happen, making this show keep tick, even when 52 years old now. So bravo. Thank you for your time today.
You're
Thank you,
welcome.
Stephen. Thank
And
you.
I look forward to not seeing or not recognizing your work or thinking about your work for years to come. Keep it up. Excellent.
Yeah, and
That's
a
great.
final thing just to say, there's a tremendous amount of work that winds up on the cutting room floor over the years because of the cut from dress to air. But it's still,
Now,
we just keep moving forward and doing a lot of work.
There's an article.
Yeah.
What
And
sets have been cut from the show?
And sometimes they're the most complicated ones.
Yeah.
Actually, sometimes they're the ones we put in the most work.
We should make a list for you.
Yeah.
I was going to say, do you document
actually-
those? That would be interesting. Well, all right. Well, I got to ask. So, what happens to them? Do they just get tossed aside, or do you salvage them in some way?
No,
We
that's it.
did Big Game Hunter, that show. Do you remember it? It was like a big trophy room for the heads from that
Yeah.
show got cut.
Oh yeah, that was nice.
But yeah, there's a lot of sometimes more challenging pieces that get cut. What do we do with them? Is you were asking before about the pieces, but we reuse those pieces. They just don't stay together as a full set. But we have columns and windows and doors and fireplaces, and we've just categorized them that way and try to pull from them. Even if they're drawn a little different, sometimes we compromise and say, I have this really nice fireplace, and we reuse them just to save time. But generally, the gesture and the drawing and the design is still honored as best as it could be given the time we have.
And the idea of something being cut is, it's not a nice feeling at the end of when they do the cuts for the live show. You're a little bit, demoralized.
Yeah, I've heard that from the writers, performers, through the years, reading interviews and watching and saying, yeah, I was supposed to be so and so, and then it got cut. Or there's some people who've barely been on the show because everything they were supposed to be in just didn't make it. So that last question. Now you're tapping into. I have a whole list of questions, but I'm like, it kind of got reduced to this small thing. I talk too much. So you have these elements you reuse and things that stay in storage that can be reprocessed or reworked. Are there some that go back to Belushi and Aykroyd? Do you still have some things that, like, maybe even just for nostalgia reasons, that you bring out and you say, that's the door we always use, or something like that? the connection.
I kind of can speak to that. I as the shop, Keith maybe with the props and dressing too, but as a shop, it's remarkable. I try to hold on to things. Sometimes I'd hold on to them forever, but no, we don't have anything that goes that far back. I'll hold on. I'm thinking of like a MacGruber, right? And that was a while back, and I still have the counter. It's nostalgic to me because it was one of the early sets I did, and I don't want to throw the counter out. But eventually, everything has its time, or it needs a recycle, and it's like, oh, okay, it's close, and we'll rework it, and then it kind of rots away and becomes the carpenter will say, I can't do anything with this again, and I will get rid of it. But we do try to reuse as long as we could a lot of those pieces and parts. It's a story.
I wouldn't say there are any that are 45 or 50 years old.
No.
All right. I will close there. If you ever want to put them on eBay, I'm sure you guys could make, do it for charity. You can make a pretty penny. There's MacGruber's table. I would definitely have that. My wife would kill me for it, but right in the living room.
Yeah.
MacGruber.
Yep.
So thank you so much for your time today. And again, thank you for your work.
Thank you,
I can't wait to watch the new seasons coming soon. So have a great day and best of luck. Cheers.
Thanks, Stephen.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye now.